We can swap city stories here.
Swap,
So,
yeah.
yeah, for sure. Well, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out.
Yeah,
I'm really
same.
looking forward to peeling back the layers of your professional life. And the first question I have for you is, when we look at the calendar, there's a level of PTSD right now because 4 years ago, it all just flatlined. How did you survive the pandemic, and how did it subsequently change you?
Yeah. So it's funny, I mean, I like knew that in the back of my head, but I guess I haven't really thought about it very much.
Which is a good
That
thing.
it's a surreal, yeah, it's sort of surreal to think back to that experience. I mean, to be really honest with you, I mean, obviously teaching Pilates in person, like, was not a thing that we could do for a few months. Boston did eventually, after the initial quarantine, lift the one-on-one training ban, so we were able to do that, and that's most of the Pilates I do is one-on-one. So financially, it didn't affect me much, and I have another job. So I was doing my corporate job in that time. And to be really honest with you, I think it made me realize how much I had been burning myself out, because I actually look back very fondly on quarantine as a time of like getting enough sleep, making lots of homemade bread, and not feeling like I was running around trying to do 100 things. And I often think like, how can I get that energy back in my life? So I think it changed me though, because um it made me realize, just because of the way that people responded to various aspects of it, it made me realize how sort of fragile the human connection can be and how much we crave it.
Yeah.
I think I think that we've had to fight for it a little bit since then. And it's important that we do. I mean, in my line of work, I've done a lot of research on how COVID-19 affected populations who had chronic pain, and there was an increase in pain symptoms and severity, and even new chronic pain reports during that time and after that time. And not just because of long COVID having symptoms and so on, but because when we're socially isolated and we are not moving our bodies in the way we used to, and we're not feeling connected, and we have that, depression and anxiety, it really does show up in the body. So I think that was, a kind of a realization too, as part of my own journey with learning about pain and working with people.
I mean, there's a physiological level that goes into it too, that goes throughout your whole body, I mean, if you're not getting nourished. So,
Yeah, I mean, your nervous system is a big part of how you feel.
yeah.
So, I mean, we're wired to be social, and then we were like suddenly not social. And then we were suddenly like kind of fearful of each other, in addition to this virus. And that, I think, was like a double whammy, really,
Yeah,
honestly.
it certainly was. It's weird. A lot of people say that that time period was a silver lining. It was really good. Life's, you know what I'm saying? I mean, look at the earth, like the canals in
Oh my
Venice
gosh,
cleared up.
I know that like footage was amazing of like the dolphins and stuff.
I
Yeah.
know. It's like I went there. I was in a water taxi the morning that 9/11 happened. I was on
Oh
I
my
was in
gosh.
yeah, I was
That's a
backpacking.
story.
That was, I was like in a Hemingway novel. The minute I saw that happen, I was
Whoa.
like I'm just in the back of a water taxi and some dude's like Nuevo York and he's doing this and I'm like, are you talking about the '93 bombing? I'm just like la di da. I landed in Paris on the 4th of September. I just didn't contact America whenever I'd go to Europe and do trips. I just unplugged everything before smartphones. But
Especially then. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, but it's weird too with COVID. There was so many good stories, silver linings, and I remember at one point seeing an SNL skit where people got their COVID tests and they got it and they were jumping on their beds and excited. And people freaked out and was like, "What are you doing?" It's like, no, people felt like that. It was like adults got a day off from school.
Yes. I
So
know.
it was wild. So not only are you helping people, you know, improve their fitness, you're a best-selling author, but I want to get to the crux right here in 2024 with what you do for a living. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders. It's career day, and one of the little kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
I help people who have lots of aches and pains that doctors weren't able to fix. um, figure out how to stay active and do what they need to do on a daily basis without being afraid of being in pain, and hopefully over time increasing their confidence and reducing pain so that they feel good. So as you get older, it gets harder to feel good in
Uh-huh.
your body, kids.
Yes, it certainly does. So let me ask you this. When you were in the third grade, what was your dream? What did you want to grow up and become?
A dancer on Broadway.
Okay. So did you
Yeah.
dance for a long time? How did all of that happen?
Yeah, so I did a lot of theater. I started my first show was The Wiz. I was just a dancer in the Yellow Brick Road. So I sang on the Ease on Down the Road song and stuff. And then I danced and sang and did shows. And then I was actually in the middle of a performance of the very start of a performance of a musical called Godspell,
Yeah.
if you're familiar.
Uh-huh.
And I had a sudden jolt of pain. I was only 13, maybe going on 14. I had a sudden jolt of pain through my low back that kind of immobilized me. I pushed through for the performance, but that was my introduction to chronic pain. So
Wow.
unfortunately, it wasn't long after third grade that I actually got really acquainted with scary pain. And that repeated itself through my teens. And so eventually, I mean, for that and other reasons, I mean, let's be honest, like as as I'm in love as I was with the thing, like, was I good enough to be on Broadway? I'll never know. I don't know about that. But at any rate, my sort of dreams were cut short because my back pain kept coming for no reason anyone could figure out. And when
Oh,
it did, I was like laid out on the living room floor for days. So yeah.
wow. So medically they couldn't localize and say this is why.
I don't, so I mean, the only place my parents took me was to a chiropractor.
Gotcha.
And, looking back, like especially writing my book, I mean, my story is features heavily in the book. And it really helps me process like that whole thing because I think for a long time I felt like, geez, why didn't you take me to urgent care, But I wasn't in a car accident. I didn't like
Yeah.
fall down, I mean, they must have been confused. I was
Yeah.
13. I had an able body. I was, active and nothing had happened to me. And yet I was having this like shock of pain. And so the chiropractor did some like, symptomatic stuff and, there was no, my primary care knew what was happening, but nobody ever sent me for imaging or anything. And it would come out of nowhere. And I mean, and looking back, I think it was very tied to, anxiety and other things that were going on. But yeah, there was never any diagnosis of any kind. And not until in my 20s when I actually did have a disc herniation, which I think happened separately. But that was just that this has been like a through line of my life is dealing with pain.
My stepdaughter was a dancer for a long, long time,
Mm.
and around 14, 15, she started getting these weird pains in her hips, and then
Huh.
ended up getting to a point where she just because competitive dance, the whole thing just wasn't
Oh,
really
it's
her thing.
rough.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard. So she ended up getting out, but she comes from a line of women that have fibromyalgia, so they kind of threw that out, and I'm like, God, she's only a teenager,
Yeah.
but all of these things manifest. But I used to do announcing at all of these competitions and watch all of the pounding the body would go through. It's amazing. And when you do that all the time, you practice and compete. It's like, to me, it naturally seems as though the natural conclusion is
Yes.
it's going to catch up. I was a distance runner and my shins are shot now. I have to bicycle, but I pounded on the pavement for so long
Yes.
that your body can probably only take so much if your DNA says I'm out, you know?
100%. And I mean, like, as you pointed out, I think we're sort of probably genetically predisposed one way or the other to certain problems.
Yeah.
And, we now understand that hypermobility in your joints, like the ability to be like extra flexible is kind of it's a condition of its own.
Yeah.
But it back in the day, like we didn't think of that. Like you were either stiff or you were lucky to be flexible. And so I feel like people who are hyper flexible are also drawn to things like dance and
Yeah.
so maybe we're put into positions where their ligaments were kind of put, at risk in a way. And of course, you're developing, your
Yeah.
body's developing at that age, you're susceptible. I mean, I think there's so much more that we know now about protecting young athletes, but still folks, folks come in and they're having aches and pains and like the origin is I played college volleyball or you know what I
Yep.
mean? So Yeah, you said definitely we wear those scars.
Yeah, for sure. So who's been a hero for you? Who's been an inspiration for you in your life?
My grandmother is the first person that comes to mind, and my dad's mom. She was born in the Bronx in 1931, and so slightly post-depression. She was the youngest of four kids, and they were all boys, and her. And so I'm sure it was a tough time in New York City at that time. And her parents were both, immigrants from Italy. And her mom died right in front of her of a brain aneurysm at like 15. So she went through becoming a woman in a house full of boys, a whole house full of super Italian, boys,
Yeah,
and went through World War II. And um and also my grandfather was a New York City fireman and died tragically. So she just was the most resilient person I ever met. And I think of her all the time, because of the way in which she modeled, looking for the good in everything and finding joy even when things are hard, and just, yeah, that strength. I mean, I think about her all the time when I'm in that moment, and I really feel like I honor her with my work as well.
the older Italian women are the ones that needed to be the president of the country because they aren't going to play games, right?
No kidding. No
They're going to
kidding.
get in there and they're going to straighten the whole joint out, you know? So, um, so let me ask you this. If you could meet one person alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating or interesting, who would that be? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
Who's alive?
I mean, we can do a ghost. We can
Um,
open the door.
um, yeah, I mean, oof, that's really tough. Let me think for a second. I mean, it's hard because there's like so many super strong women that I would love to meet, but I
Yeah,
think um Brene Brown is definitely a person who
yeah.
comes to mind. I mean, she's managed to shape the kind of pop psychology of like a whole generation, and I think it would be interesting to hear, one on one, like her story, and get some advice,
Yeah,
get some tidbits.
yeah,
Of course, I would love to meet Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I mean, I
yeah,
think she seems like she was a cool lady, and
yeah.
um, you know, lots of women in our history, I think, who have been pioneers. I think would be really exciting to meet them.
I think right now is probably, I mean, I don't know what your sense is, but it seems like this is the time right now that there needs to be some figureheads, some revolutionary stuff happening with all of the rights, the reproductive rights, with all of the Roe
Hmm.
v. Wade, all of these things. Like there is a full-on assault against the female in a health kind of way. I mean, even with pay, like it just seems like we've come so far, but just in the last like 10 years, everything's just completely regressing.
Yeah, it doesn't feel great to be a woman in this country right now, that's
Yeah,
for sure. And I mean, I think what's also challenging is we need leaders, and we also need folks who can really like rally and align a generation that is pretty apathetic, because I'm also a step parent and have a teenage stepson. And I mean, he's generally pretty clued in. Actually, he has interest in social issues, but I see a lot of his peers and folks that are in that generation, and they're just really disengaged from what's happening. And I think so. I mean, I hate to blame technology and be that person, but they're like so locked into
yeah,
as if the real world is happening in the phone and not like happening around them. And it's like if I don't like what's happening, I close that tab. You know what I mean? And they don't participate in community in a way that we always haven't been had historically. And again, I wonder if COVID has sort of laid the groundwork for that, because
yeah.
he lost 2 years of socialization in high school, right? That he was mostly home. And so like all those key networks that you build. Um, so yeah, I mean, of course, I fear, but I also at the same time, it's like so much damage has been done. Like I don't even know where we would go from here. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm also a woman who is in a perimenopause stage in my life, and there are many challenges of trying to engage the medical system in that part of that chapter, which has been sort of interesting. So there's just so many gaps about how we fill our health needs. And there's most of the research that decisions and policies are made on. Um, it's historic and it often didn't include women at all. So even like medications, like some of the dosages are not necessarily like correct for a female body or depending on the person's size. And there's just a lot of gaps. And I
Yeah.
think we're kind of we're just like backed up on fixing that. And then this new wave of restriction and control of our bodies is really scary. And I really, I mean, I'm in Massachusetts, so I don't feel a lot of the like immediate dread. Um, but I really feel for my fellow woman in other states who might, get an ectopic pregnancy and have to take it to term when it threatens their life. Like, wow. I mean, I never thought I would live in that generation. That's really sad.
I live with three generations of women, so I went to a women's march, I think a couple weeks after the whole Roe v. Wade thing got rolled back a couple
Mm,
years ago. And living in the Midwest, that's scary. But the one thing that was resounding was shortly after that, Kansas resoundingly repealed it. And I was surprised
mm.
that of all of the rural and red parts of Kansas that they came together. So in general, that spoke volumes to me that, you know what? The people are going to win. We're going to
Yeah.
decide what's good for us. So that's what I hold on to after that.
That's true. And there have been a few states that have actually come through in that way and in a way that I didn't expect. And um again, I think we also just really need to get our young women really excited about participating in politics and having agency for themselves. And that's what I hope will happen.
But the problem is that it's these older, crazy, demented white dudes. And like, you know what I'm saying? Because
Can't say you're
Obama,
wrong.
right. Like for Obama, for instance, it was fresh, new blood and ideas, and there was a vibrancy, and that was a movement. That was like in my lifetime, one of the very few times that I felt that real wave mounting and people were
Mhm.
excited. But now, like, no matter where you fall politically, it's like, come on. Of all of the millions and hundreds of millions of people that exist in this planet, this is the best we can do?
Yeah, it's sort of it's a dire situation right now. It
Yeah.
honestly is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, let's get to the heart and soul of what you do. And I want to know what gets you out of bed every day. What gets you to not only motivate others and to help other people, but to also focus and evolve on yourself as a human.
Yeah, so I feel really, really lucky that I get to do work that feels aligned to my purpose, and I don't take it lightly that not a lot of people don't get to have that feeling of what getting out of bed and doing what they feel like they were really called to do. And because of the journey that I walked, where I have come to the point where I feel better in my body in my 40s than I did in my 20s, I just know that it's possible to feel better. And I know how much the stories that we tell ourselves about our bodies, and especially since we're talking on this topic, a lot of the folks I work with are women who have also gone through the weight cycling and, just really negative messaging around diet culture and trying to achieve an ideal body size that wasn't really in the DNA for them. And so women walk around with lots of really negative stories in their heads about their body and where it belongs in society. And you could extend that to marginalized folks and people with disabilities, and lots of folks are feeling that pain. And so that pain, like knowing that that pain exists, knowing that folks are waking up every day being like, is my body going to show up for me today? And do I have the energy to try? Um, just knowing that that's happening for people and that I might be able to do something to like lessen that is what gets me out of bed every day. And the fact that I see people in my studio making progress every day on their goals of becoming active again is, hugely motivating for me. And I also, I'm on a journey because pain started so early for me, and I've been trying to figure out how I keep myself from getting, pulled back into that kind of fear. I mean, there's just a lot of fear in my own personal life. And
Yeah.
so trying to remember that courage is facing fear, not having no fear, and that it's okay to feel, what you're feeling, and that, moving the body is a really awesome way to just kind of find balance and wholeness. Um, all those things are a big part of the ways in which I try to evolve personally, to show up stronger and able to be compassionate for the people around me who depend on me, to motivate them to try and challenge themselves, because we have to sort of, most of the work I do is not just, there's exercise. I mean, Pilates is exercise, but because I'm working with people who have persistent pain of one kind or another, I'm usually also trying to put them in situations where there's a movement that they're afraid of. Maybe it's falling, and so I'm working on tricky balance. Maybe it's leaning backwards. Maybe it's stepping up. Maybe, there's like specific things folks have been through that have caused pain. And so I have to create situations in which they can be challenged to face that fear, and then being able to encourage people and make good decisions about keeping them safe. I mean, that that motivates me.
So let me ask you this. You obviously have to dispense good advice to people and help your clients. What's the best advice that you've ever gotten?
The best advice I've ever gotten was when and I'm not even sure if it was advice, but sort of, I had a really bad flare up of back pain. Um, I don't know, 5 years ago or something. Maybe it was even just after COVID. And I had scheduled a personal trainer session, and I just said, listen, I'm not feeling well. I'm my back, I barely move. And my trainer, who I've been working with for years now, who I really respect, said, come in anyway. And so the come in anyway is like just set me on a path, because I did come in and I could barely move. Like I could barely get on all fours. And yet we moved. We moved for 45 minutes gently and in all kinds of different ways. And ultimately, my body felt better because of it. And it taught me something
Yeah.
about the fact that actually, I mean, I knew that moving was better than resting, but like even in the really bad pain flare up, and this is obviously a specific type of pain, but I learned like, okay, I really always need to move, and I always need to keep, believing that there's some kind of movement that's possible. And that has served me very, very well ever since.
So you clearly have evolved over your life and done a lot of things. Of all of the things that you've done, what are you the proudest of?
Boy, you're really hitting these
I,
questions,
I you know,
Joe.
if you're not awake, we're gonna wake you up.
um, Gosh, what am I the proudest of? That's so tough. I mean, it's trite, but I mean, opening my business was really scary, and I'm very proud that I did it, because I did it, I have an anxiety disorder and I have a lot of fear, and sometimes some days are harder, and there were a lot of naysayers, that like you don't have the constitution it takes to to be an entrepreneur. And I certainly wasn't craving being an entrepreneur. I just wanted the ability to create a space that was the space I wish I had when
Yeah.
I was going through my hard time. And yeah, so pushing through that I'm very proud of that, and doing it scared.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
um who do I think I am? So I'm sort of a blend of, I mean, I could this answer could go in like 100 different
Oh,
ways, but
an infinite.
yeah. So but the thing that comes to mind, I'm just gonna go with it, is, I'm sort of a blend of like an intellectual and a creative. And I think, I have to feed those. I have to feed both sides of
Uh-huh.
those parts of my brain. Um, and I doubt myself a lot, and I have a lot of insecurities, although I think a lot of people don't see me that way. I mean, I also have like a corporate persona, right? Which is because I still work part-time in corporate life to make ends meet. And I think most people, if they saw me speaking or running a workshop, would not realize I'm actually pretty insecure. And I think it's important people recognize that most of the people that you see doing really scary things are actually also afraid and facing their demons. And I think that that's important. Um, but I am sensitive. I am tenacious. I am curious, and I really crave authentic, transparent, honest connection with people in my world, and I don't really tolerate anything less than that.
So let's do a fun final question here, and it's going to be about Boston history. If
Whew.
you could, okay, see, yeah, the therapy session is over. Everything went really well.
Jeez, okay, good.
So what we're going to do is we're going to put you in a time machine when we get off this call, and you can go back in time and see one event in Boston's history with your own eyes. Where are you going?
Oof.
Yeah,
Ah.
right?
Oh.
I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff that happened.
There's so much crazy stuff that's happened
Yeah.
here. And I mean, so I live in Charlestown, which is the neighborhood that was actually the beginning of Boston.
Okay.
And it got burned to the ground in the Revolutionary War. It's where the Battle of
Okay.
Bunker Hill was.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think there's a part of me that would be sort of curious because it's like would be very different than the neighborhood that I know now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. I mean, there's also, I think, sporting events that it would have been sort of cool to, experience firsthand.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think I would go back. I'd go pretty far back to see what it was really like. I think we have a lot of folklore around and romanticism around, kind of this being the birthplace of the Revolutionary War
The
and all
Tea
that stuff. And
Party. Yeah.
yeah, and I'd be sort of curious to see really, what was that like?
Yeah.
And also was Paul Revere really like a jackass or
Right. That's what we all want to know. All right. Was he an
yeah.
asshole or was he okay?
Right,
So
exactly.
so let me ask you this. Are you guys all on Tom Brady detox?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like a huge sports person, and actually, I grew up in New York, so I'm kind of a Giants fan.
That's fine.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I thought it was kind of fun that they did the Dunkings, commercial during the Super Bowl.
Oh,
That
that's
was pretty
right.
entertaining.
That's right.
But yeah, I'm also I think I just got kind of tired of the whole like him and Giselle, like
Yeah,
drama. Like I don't care. Like let them live
I
their
know.
lives, like move on and also just the fact that he was like, I'm playing, I'm not playing, I'm playing, I'm not playing.
I
Yeah.
know.
We're done. We're like
Yeah.
you had an awesome run. I mean, I'm sure that's hard to say goodbye to. I'm sure that it is, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think we're all pretty ready to move on.
Just pack it up and move on. Yeah. So let me ask you this. If anyone wants to get your books, they want to hire you, they want to learn more, reach out, any of the good business, what do they do?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I mean, the easiest way is movementremedies.org, which is my website. Uh, I'm on Instagram, movement_remedies. And my book is called You're Meant to Move. It's on Amazon all over the world. So yeah, those are the ways to find me.
Excellent. Dana, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for opening up. Thank you for your story. Best of luck with everything.
My pleasure.
And then